Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos, this one into the Gemini full moon. I'm going to give you an outline of how I'm going to structure this video. First of all, we need to understand what a Gemini full moon means. For us all collectively, it occurs every single year around this time. So I'll go into that in some detail. I'm also then going to share with you on screen the exact date and time it will occur in all the major cities of the world, because it does go across the 7th and the 8th of December. Then I'll share with you a simple birth chart wheel which we can all collectively relate to in terms of the distribution of where all the planets are interacting with one another when this event occurs. Then, as usual, I'm going to share with you the actual event chart. So the natal astrology of when the full moon is exact, based on Greenwich Mean Time. And this gives us an ascendant in Scorpio, but it does put the sun in the second house of everyday money, and the moon, and that very volatile conjunction that it's forging with Mars in its retrograde on the other side of the heavens in the sector of longer term finances. So over the next couple of weeks, I think it's fair to say there's going to be a lot of push and pull around resources. But of course, Gemini is a sign of everyday communication, whereas Sagittarius is much more about the higher philosophy, the higher truth, the big picture, not so immediate, but both are mutable, so very flexing. And finally, please stay with me, I will then give you a forecast for each of the 12 zodiac signs, from Aries through to Pisces, which you can watch in terms of your sun or your ascendant, or both if they're different. The choice is yours. Now, year 2023 is virtually upon us. If you'd like to discover what this year will hold for you as an individual beyond this zodiac broadcast at the end of this video, please give me 3 pieces of your personal birth data of time, date and place of birth. I can give you your forecast for the year. You can get the rest of this year, what there is, free. But also in my special package of 30% off, my life roadmap. This can help you to understand some of the patterns that have occurred in your situation and how you can work with them in a more effective way, even the more challenging ones or the ones that give you fantastic opportunities. Please see the link beneath this video for more information. Finally, if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. If you're an ongoing viewer, thank you so much for all your support. So what does a Gemini full moon mean? Well, Gemini is the 3rd zodiac sign in the heavens, and it's very much to do with quick moving, flexible conversation. So perfect for the age we live in terms of technology, social media, instant messages and so forth. But Gemini energy also relates to our ties with our immediate everyday world. So whether it's the people we encounter daily, whether it's neighbours or siblings, and it is also to do with being very fleet-footed, because this sign is ruled by Mercury, the winged messenger. So it's very much about those thoughts and those talks that we have. But Gemini can be quite an impulsive influence in terms of how it views situations, and the fact that the sun is on the other side of the heavens in house 9, the sign of Sagittarius, that's very much about the longer term communications, the philosophies that drive those actual interactions we have through the guise of the 3rd house and of Gemini itself. So it could be that there can be some heated discussions over the next couple of weeks, And those heated discussions could be because we seem to live in a very polarized world where people see things in quite extreme ways. Now, we're very lucky that we do have platforms like Twitter that enable each of us to have an individual voice. Now, that may not be true of all the citizens of, say, China and Russia, but for many of us, we have a superb platform to be self-expressive. And I think what the Sun in Sagittarius is asking us to do is to balance our immediate need to speak and reflex around information we receive by being more conscious of what the big picture is. So slowing things down a little bit. But also this third ninth house axis can be about travel. Gemini is about short, quick journeys, and Sagittarius very, very much more about international boundaries and longer distance travel. Can also be about higher philosophies, higher education, can also be about the rule of law, but also spirituality, because of course the sign of Sagittarius is governed by Jupiter, the planet of expansion and potentially of good fortune. Now on the screen now you can see where this event is occurring in all the big cities of the world across the 7th and the 8th of December. Now I'm now showing on the screen the simple birth chart wheel, which enables us to understand what's going on with this particular event collectively. So you can see the position of the Moon and Mars just a few minutes apart in Gemini in House 3, and there on the other side of the heavens in House 9 is the Sun. But we also have Venus in the sign of Sagittarius too, and you can see that Mercury has just moved into the sign of Capricorn, but it is still in a dissociate conjunction with Venus, and that actually can be quite a lucky combination, because Venus in Sagittarius is very much about the truth of relationships, and Mercury brings a bit more of a business-like vibe in its toehold in the sign of Capricorn, but between them they can still be very helpful. But what else can we take? Well, I think it really is the location of Mars, because Mars is still in retrograde, as it will be through to the 12th of January. It has now shrugged off the enervating and draining energies of Neptune, which dominated the whole of October and November and the first few days of December. And of course Neptune has also now just gone direct. So things have felt very bogged down and dissipated. Things are gathering impetus and energy. But because of Mars being so close to the Moon's very much about reception. It's about how we feel things. It's about our immediate environment. And therefore I feel that the third house can be our belief systems in some ways, so we can really hold on to those belief systems with Mars's pugnacious energy in a very determined way. And because the Sun and Mars are in a broad conjunction for the whole of the week surrounding this full moon, there is going to be plenty of volatile standoffs this week. It's not a week to be rushing any kind of journey either, especially if we're the person in charge of the transportation. So if we're driving anywhere, or we're using a motorcycle or a bicycle, important that we enjoy the journey and don't try to get there ahead of ourselves, because we could rush something. And there is the potential here, I don't want to be too fearful of an accident because of the impulsive and rather demand side energies of Mars, which of course is a more masculine, frustrated energy potentially in its retrograde, angry energy in its conjunction with the Moon and against the Sun. So if we encounter somebody on a journey who's a bit wound up, it could soon end up in something that is rather unpleasant. So very, very important to try to slow things down with our mode of communication, our mode of thought. Take our time before having important discussions, otherwise things could get quite fiery. And of course Mars, very much the planet of fire, through its rulership of Aries. and through its rulership of Scorpio, very much about desire. So, it's important that when we discuss things, we remember to listen. And I think that's what the Sun and Venus in the sign of Sagittarius are asking us to do, to make sure that we maintain this gracious listening skills. But you can see that Venus is actually in a direct right angle with Jupiter. Now this is interesting because they're both the planets of fortune. Jupiter also rules the sign of Pisces, just like it does Sagittarius. It's the traditional ruler. It is, of course, now travelling forwards after its retrograde, and is known as the greater benefic, and Venus the lesser benefic. But in terms of the simple birth chart wheel, you can see that one's in house 9 and the other's in house 12. So that's suggesting some exaggeration, particularly around affections, is possible on this particular event. Also, Venus is broadly squaring up with Neptune too. That can lead to idealism, which isn't necessarily great. So this is not a great time to put anyone on a pedestal, particularly if we see them as having a philosophy or a belief system that we think is absolutely brilliant. It's possible that someone can teach us something, or we can learn information that's very valuable to us, but also important to keep one foot on terra firma. Now, what helps us to do that is that Saturn in house 11, Aquarius, the sign of the collective of us all, is actually forging a broad but a very constructive trine and enabling 120-degree angle to both the Moon and Mars. So Saturn brings a bit of stability, but because the sign of Aquarius is about detachment, we need to just step back a bit in order to try and see the big picture. Now, obviously, Saturn also forges a superb sextile to the position of the Sun, a bit of a broader sextile to Saturn, but still very helpful. So we can overcome some of the challenges of this particular event by just cooling things off, talking things over with a friend who tends to be honest, truthful in their approach, but kindly, pragmatic, and steps back a little bit and helps us to see the big picture. Now, we also have Venus is square with Jupiter, can be a time when we think that anything is possible around resources. And I think because of the tensions that we're all facing in terms of the headwinds of the financial demands of this particular age, which was really once and for all triggered by the total lunar eclipse of the 8th of November, although it had been building up since the North Node entered the sign of Taurus in January. The true North Node point moved on the 18th of January. Really, since then, there have been a lot of intense pressures building up in terms of the cost of living. So that gives you a flavour of how we can relate to this collectively. But what about the event chart, when this event exactly occurs? So based on Greenwich Mean Time, we can see that the ascendant is 4 degrees in the sign of Scorpio, which is intense, direct, and it does mean that we have Uranus and the North Node in a conjunction in house 7, very much to do with our relationships. So there could be a degree of volatility that's still playing out. Saturn and Uranus, which have been dominating in their abrasive right angle square for the last couple of years, have now stretched apart. What a relief. That really came to fruition around about the 3rd of December, beyond 3 degrees. So we'll take that all day long, but it does suggest that turbulence around relationships. But you can see the Sun, Venus and Mercury are all in house 2, those everyday finances, and Mars in its conjunction with the Moon in house 8. So arguments could be about money. A lot of very strident conversations around that subject. We can also see that the midheaven, which is how we connect to the world at large, all of us together, is actually opposed by Saturn. So our desire, to have recognition and to live our lives in a joyous, free-spirited way, very Leonian, is really challenged by the emotional realities of fuel costs in terms of the home, insecurity around our situations, whether it is to do with finances or to do with some of the wider environmental issues going on in the world, or to do with obviously food shortages, distributional shortages, and of course anything to do with the wars that are playing out in different parts of the world. Also, another thing to say is that with such strident energies between the 2nd and 8th house, the industrial action that's been brewing up, certainly in the UK, is not going to go anywhere anytime soon away, because people are really invested in what they see as the injustice of 12 years of austerity, when their real earnings have dropped considerably and the cost of living has gone up massively. So expect that, particularly in the UK, because this is obviously very relevant for the UK because it's based on Greenwich Mean Time. As I'm always saying, there will be other astrologers who will give you another picture based on Los Angeles or Paris or Central European time. It just depends on where the astrologer is based. But I like GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, or Universal Time, because I feel it represents an energy for us all in the world. Now, please stay with me whilst I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, from Aries through to Pisces. So Aries, your forecast for the next couple of weeks sees your ruling planet Mars right at the heart of the action. And of course, Mars is about action. So don't expect to be too rooted to the sofa, even if you are a born-again couch potato like my good self. This could be a time when you feel so very restless. You're going to want to get out and do things. And if you're someone who is a little bit more into enjoying stimulating exchanges, then this can be a time of chatter. It could be a time when you find out quite a lot of information, but your drive to do that can be absolutely enormous. Now, of course, Mars, your ruling planet, is also very much about instant gratification. It's not one for sitting on its hands. It's about getting stuck in. And that's why I feel that you may have a desire to be a lot more interactive or a lot more physically active, even at this late stage of the year. Now, it could mean that you're going to want to express some frustrations that you've been feeling for some while, and it may be because you feel that somebody is a little bit evasive, because although the sun is in your sister fire sign of Sagittarius, this is a very mutable position for the sun, and it can kind of flex, and you might want to get some information, and if someone's withholding it or being a little bit changeable in their approach, that could really see the red mist descend. So I think the important thing to understand is to try to use the excess nervous energy you have in some kind of constructive way. Otherwise, if you feel that someone is in some ways mucking you around, you may really want to be very direct in asserting your boundaries and letting them know that it is not acceptable, totally understandably. But you do also have Neptune and Jupiter locked into your 12th house. These are very, very sensitive energies, especially in the conjunction. Can also make you very idealistic about the spiritual side of life. But because Venus, the planet of relating, is also in house 9, if there is somebody that you're drawn to and they also seem a bit elusive in terms of replying to messages or agreeing to meet up, or it always seems like there's a little bit of the proverbial cheese that's dragging you towards them, but you can never quite get clear about what they want or what they're prepared to give you, that could be quite challenging as well. So I think you're really looking to know exactly where you stand, and you're prepared to be very direct and to the point, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think underneath this is quite a lot of sensitivity at the moment. So knowing where you stand in terms of the truth of situations is really vital, particularly, as I should say, that Mercury and Jupiter are in a disassociate square. So Mercury's now just gone into your 10th house of work and Jupiter in that 12th house. So if there are energies you can't quite pin down or see, or not getting clarity from people, this is where your frustration is going to be greatest. Which brings us to Taurus. Well, for you, Taurus, Mars has been in your second solar house since the end of August. And of course, it has been in retrograde since the 30th of October. And if your financial position has really felt quite challenging, and of course, we've all experienced some kind of change to our reality in that arena, then this particular event can really bring a sense of injustice, if that's what you feel, very much to the fore. But don't forget that your ruling planet Venus is in house 8 still. It's just about to make a transition on Saturday, later this week, into Capricorn. And I think the truth of a situation is going to become much clearer to you by that point. So if you're waiting to get some responses around a contract or a payment offer, or understand more about the cost of something you want to buy, or you're setting your boundaries over your Christmas budget, by the end of this particular week, I think things will be a little bit clearer. But you can still gain by Venus being in that location, but you need to be realistic because it's square with both Neptune and Jupiter. Could see you in particular be one of the signs that could put someone on a little bit of a pedestal when you perhaps need to use all of your earthy realism to try to test the reality of a situation, so you can see what the substantive benefits would be. So airy-fairy ideas I don't really feel are what you need at the moment. I think you need to know exactly where you stand. Now, Gemini, for you, this event I feel can evoke a lot of frustration around what you perceive as unfairness around relationships. So if you feel that someone is not necessarily understanding your situation as much as you would like, you could really boil over much more than you're normally inclined to do, because your great gift is that you can flex, see things in different ways, make people laugh, bring people with you. You have a huge talent for this, but I think there may be something that you are feeling a little bit exercised about, and you may want to put your foot down. But just remember, with Venus being in your opposite sign in a square with Jupiter and Neptune, how you're seeing a situation may be a little bit distorted. That's not a criticism. We can all have different mindsets depending on even how well we've slept. If we don't sleep so well, obviously things can seem much more irritating and annoying. If we sleep well, we can shrug our shoulders and just say, well, that's life, that's people. So just watch where your perspective is a little bit at the moment, I feel, because that square between Venus and Mercury and Jupiter and Neptune is potentially distorting how you're connecting to the wider world, and therefore you could be taking something personally when actually someone is being very straightforward with you, and it could be you that's being a bit grumpier than you would normally be inclined to do because of having Mars so close to the moon. And remember, the moon in your sign is very detached, and underneath the detachment can be your true feelings. And sometimes Gemini people will try to rationalize things, and I think Uranus being in the 12th house has been a crash course over the last couple of years of not doing that, of getting much more deeply in touch with the truth, Uranus, of your more psychological needs, the spiritual sphere and realm, because that helps us all to get a better physical perspective. So that's the opportunity, but also the challenge for you, Gemini. Which brings us to Cancer. Well, of all the zodiac signs, I think having Mars in your 12th house since the end of August has been really quite tough, because you're a very protected sign and you have a strong need to control your immediate environment. Nothing wrong with that at all, but it gives you a sense of security. But that can leak into trying to control things outside your immediate environment if you're unsure of your ground. And what Mars in retrograde, particularly in its square with Neptune, has been doing all of October, all of November, and the first few days of December, is really been distorting or amplifying some past angers and injustices and unfairness to a heightened level. And all of that can be reaching a real peak, a real crescendo. So if there's something that you feel isn't being looked at in the way that you feel is right and proper, you can feel very vulnerable but very angry all at the same time. So what's the lesson of the Sun? Well, the Sun's saying it's okay to work with the practicalities of situations and our physical health, but we all need to understand that, we are a trinity, aren't we, between our physical needs, our mental needs, and our emotional needs. And if those are well worked out and balanced, that's really good for us. So I think this particular event can push into the open something around your vulnerabilities. It could be linked to a past relationship which has gone wrong, or past hurts or rejections or losses, or, as I say, where you feel people have not done right by you. And all of that can boil to the surface if something around the orderly working of your world isn't quite right. So it could be, for example, getting an appointment cancelled at the last minute, or you turn up at the opticians and they've actually got it wrong and you've taken half a day off to get there. That kind of stuff could really make you erupt at the moment. So just watch out for that. Now, in terms of that combination between Jupiter and Neptune, it's wonderful to escape. But I don't think that this is a full moon that's going to be easy to escape from, even if you head off to the most beautiful island in the middle of the Indian Ocean and try to chill out, because there's going to be something, I feel, that's really trying to seek your attention, however much you try to push it away. Which brings us to Leo. So Leo, for you, Mars and the moon are in house 11, which is about your friendships, and the sun and Venus are in house 5, very much about your affections, your social situation, and potentially your romance, and also where you want to have joyfulness. So the sun is really emphasizing the Leonian side of your nature, the need to show and demonstrate your individuality, whereas the moon and Mars are in the part of your scope to do with your connections to others. So it could be a friend, it could be a network, it could be a group situation which causes you some uncertainties over this next couple of weeks. Maybe it's about just time management. As we come up to Christmas, it can be an enormously stressful time for a lot of people, trying to get everything done, working around COVID, working around perhaps less money being around. Even heating homes has become a critically difficult thing, and that could be in some ways, all those issues, interlopers in your desire to set up some kind of pleasurable and engaging events. So I think that there could be some disagreements if you, for example, have a love relationship and you want to spend more time with friends, or you spend a lot of time with your friends, and it's them that become discontented if you've met someone and they're feeling a bit pushed out. So this is a time when you need to be true to yourself, but also stay conscious of how your desires and your need for attention, admiration, praise, which is often quite strong, knits in with other people's needs and how they view you individually. So Virgo, your forecast for the next couple of weeks sees the moon and Mars in your 10th solar house. Now, whatever you're feeling, good or bad, you're going to find it very difficult to disguise that over this next fortnight. The Sun and Venus have been in your 4th house, which has been making you very sensitive about where you live, your immediate environment, family matters, anything to do with security. Your ruler has just moved on from that area and emerged into the sunlight, if you like, in your 5th solar house, which is much more outgoing, playful and interactive. But of course, because Mars can be a very intense energy, it has, since the 24th of August, been asking you to raise your profile, demand more attention, be much more assertive in your approach. Identify business and career possibilities which will give you a platform to shine. So basically it's been helping you to feel more self-assured. But when you put this next door to the moon, it's a very, very tender and potentially volatile combination. So if you don't feel, for example, that you're getting just the simple respect that you deserve, it may be that you're going to really be much more forceful in terms of saying how you feel, and it could be about an emotional or family issue that this shows itself around. Now, because Jupiter and Neptune are in your 7th house of relating, that combination can be very joyful. But because they're squaring up with Venus and Mercury in your 4th and 5th houses, I think the potential for exaggeration, not necessarily by you, it may be that someone close to you sees things in a very heightened way, which puts you on the back foot a little bit, and your desire may be to try to control things somewhat. Just be aware that Mars is still retrograde. It will be through to the 12th of January. It can potentially make people in the 10th house in their natal charts a little bit egocentric. Now, we all need ego. That's who we are as individuals. But there is a bit of a tender balance there. So that old maxim of bringing a sledgehammer to crack a nut might be one that you should bear in mind. Because even if someone does seriously frustrate and annoy you, try to remember that Mars could over-egg you into believing the injustice of this is somewhat greater than the actual event may really deserve. So a good time to keep your earth energies to the fore and keep one foot on terra firma. Now, Libra, having this access across your 3rd, the Sun, Venus your ruler, and houses opposite Mars and the Moon in the 9th house, means that the energies of this event is the flip side of what it is for us all collectively, if that makes sense. And Mars being on the 9th house has, and possibly has really been manifestly obvious, giving you quite a lot of push to be a bit more daring since the end of August. But since Mars went into a retrograde at the end of October, and really since the start of October, with that really dreary right angle to Neptune, some of the early feist and desire to break out and be more adventurous that you had, possibly through most of September, may have fizzled out a little bit, and that may have been somewhat frustrating. But you could, need to have a breakout over the next couple of weeks, do something completely spontaneous and different. But of course, circumstances are that maybe you have responsibilities and obligations. It's not quite so easy to do that. And that's something, of course, to really be mindful about. I would just say to you, with Mercury having just nibbled back into your 4th house, it's going to be joined by your ruler by Saturday of later this week. And they're, of course, joining up with Pluto. And then Venus goes alongside Pluto for the solar return at the start of 2023. Your 4th house of home, emotion and family is still really quite tender. It's just all the lessons that you've learned in recent years are there for you to deploy, and you are deploying them in a much more effective way. So just remember that. But if you do feel penned in or restricted in any way, or someone's trying to in some way force their credo down your proverbial throat, it can really get your back up over the next couple of weeks. And all those lessons you have learnt with Pluto's help, very painful lessons of course, could see you really put your foot down with an iron no. You're not going to budge on someone in your view who's being unfair or using some kind of guilt in order to get what they want from a situation. And good for you if you do stand in your power in this regard. Now, Scorpio, for you, the Sun and Venus are in house 2. I really hope that Venus has brought you some financial ups over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Now, I don't say this lightly, because obviously we are dealing with a very serious financial shift. But if any zodiac sign could have made a way of manifesting some greater sense of self-worth, or an improvement around at least one or two parts of their financial situation, even if some costs have still gone up, it has been you. So that's lovely. But having Venus and Jupiter across the 2nd and 5th house parts of your situation could see you very tempted to bend your original determination to maintain your budget for Christmas expenditure. Really, that could go out the window, and you could find yourself being very, very generous to someone, very in a lovely way, but just make sure that person is really worthy of your affection. So if you got to know somebody new, don't be too quick, I feel, to spoil them too rotten. However, having your ruler alongside the moon, your ruler of course has been in house 8 since the 24th of August. This is very much in keeping with your sign. If you have felt, I don't want to be crude about it, but if you have felt the need for greater intimacy since the end of August, it wouldn't be a surprise. But then just as easily, all across October and November, your love life may have felt as clear as mud, because the object of your desire may have seemed a bit unavailable, maybe coquettish, maybe pulling you in, pushing you away. It's all been a bit swirly. Perhaps it's you that's been doing this stuff. So having the Sun and Venus in your 2nd house is very much to do with satisfying your need for comfort, sensual pleasure, but Mars is in the raw part of your chart. It's just sex or dirty money. So having Moon alongside Mars can make you very desirous over the next couple of weeks to feed that deeper side of your nature. Obviously in simple astrology, the archetype is your sex mad and riven with possessiveness, jealousy and spite. And of course the truth is that Scorpio people can be very, very sensitive people and feel things very, very deeply. But whatever or wherever you are on the spectrum at the moment, that we all go through in all of our signs, or all of the components of our natal chart, where we can be the best part of ourselves or the lower part of our nature, wherever you are at the moment, your desires are going to be very strong over the next couple of weeks. So it's going to be very interesting for you. Which brings us to Sagittarius. Now Sagittarius for you, having the collective of the Sun, Venus, until recently, till Thursday, Mercury in your sign, has really been a swell Sagittarius season, and your chance to be the archer, the ultimate archer, has definitely been there, because you've been able to demonstrate to people just how much fun, how much energy you can generate. Your enthusiasm has just been sensational. But just be aware that Venus and Mercury are squaring up with your ruler on this event, so there can be an amplification of emotional issues quite strongly over the next couple of weeks. And also because Mars is on your 7th house or descendant, you could sort of apply the iron fist and not in the velvet glove. So Mars in the 7th house can be quite challenging in people's natal horoscopes, can be quite good at setting boundaries, quite aggressive, like some kind of combat or physical sports. But with Moon in the mix, Moon wants tranquility on the 7th house. It wants to find a balance. So the challenge on this event is that maybe someone around you is not going to be quite as content as you about the status quo about a relationship, and this could see you become very frustrated. And because Jupiter and Neptune are in the 4th house of emotion, it really can amplify things to a very great level, and your sense of injustice can be very strong, and your determination to assert your view of things, your side of things, so very, very overt that actually it's counterproductive. So I feel you've got a lot of potential here to defend your position around relationships, and it's just keeping that sense of perspective and you will be fine. Now Capricorn, for you, the gathering that has been in the sign of Sagittarius has been arousing quite a lot of potential insecurity, I feel. And part of the reason for this is that House 12, having Venus and Mercury in House 12 particularly, has perhaps thrown a little bit of a light on some of the shadow areas, pardon the dichotomy, of your being. So maybe some parts of your nature that you're not so comfortable with have come under much greater scrutiny, or you've become much more aware, feeling a bit insecure or fearful at times. Nothing wrong with that, it's part of the human condition. But if you're someone who likes to be very private and solid and very productive, and you like people to think that you're very much in control of things, quite understandable, these energies have been quite tough. So I think for you this could be quite a tricky full moon, to be honest. Now Mars and the moon are in your 6th house of practicalities, and it could be a little detail that goes wrong over the next couple of weeks which really sort of seems to sort of blow up into some kind of big drama. But just be aware it could be driven by something much deeper within you. So even if you feel somebody made a mistake, or they're inefficient, or they're lazy, or they're not very energized or productive in the way you can be, just be aware of what the deeper reasons can be behind your frustration. So Aquarius, since the 24th of August and Mars making its way into your 5th house, you probably had a window through to about the end of September where you really felt very, very, very good about yourself, and lovely stuff. Mars in the 5th house can, be very sexy, raunchy, alluring, giving you more self-confidence about your personal appearance. But the Sun and Venus are in the part of your horoscope which is actually quite a lot in keeping with the sign of Aquarius, the love of freedom, the truthfulness, the connection to others, the group, the network, all that kind of good stuff. So Mars and the Moon are actually in House 5 for you, which is much more Leonian. So they're making you much more single-minded and perhaps surprising people that you're sticking up more for what you want rather than being always the protector of others, hoovering up behind your vast coterie of friends. And even if you're somebody who tends to keep a smaller circle around you, you can be very, very protective of those people. So I think this event could challenge you a little bit around that. It may be something to do with a financial issue that really comes into play because of the combination of Jupiter and Neptune. You may feel that someone's almost like wanting something from you that they're almost assuming you have to give them. And I think that Mars and the Moon could see you give a very firm response, which they may not be expecting. The wonderful news, however, is that your 2 rulers have now ceased combat within 3 degrees that they've been in over the last couple of years. And some of the tensions which have just been manifest for Aquarius folks these last 24 months are going to inch by inch start to ebb away. And I think by the winter solstice the evidence of that will become clearer. You may go through a period with Mercury, Venus and the Sun all being in Capricorn along with Pluto through to the start of the year. Obviously Venus is going to make an early appearance in the sign of Aquarius in 2023, but you may go through a period where you do actually want quite a lot of quiet time. So the fact that this is quite a sociable chart in some ways is going to make way in time, and maybe you need a sense of recuperation after the punishment that Uranus and Saturn have put us Aquarius folks through over this last 2-year period. Which brings us to Pisces. You're always at the end, Pisces, but you're never least for me. I love Pisces people. So you're the 12th sign. You also have your 2 rulers pretty close together. What is it, about 6.5, 7 degrees apart? Of course, they were exactly together on the 12th of April 2022. A lot of astrologers prophesied that this would be a turning point for humankind. Of course, there were other planetary influences going on that were challenging the beautifulness that those two can have together. I have them conjunct in my natal chart in Scorpio. But I just feel that this event for you is kind of saying the position of Mars on the moon is very, very choppy, I feel, around home, emotion, family. And it could be around a professional issue. So, for example, if you work very hard, but you don't feel you get as much recognition as you really deserve, and you're always helping people, which is often the case with Pisces people, you know, you can be really very hot in that help, or really very cold when you're cheesed off. Remember, the fish go in two different directions, and there is that contrast and that polarization in your energies that, again, I don't feel many astrologers see. You know, they're all focused on the compassion and the give, but when you're cross, you can withdraw big time. But I feel that something may be difficult to ignore that's getting you down. You know, whether there is something within your home, say you live in a rented property and it has some kind of malfunction or fault that you've been putting up with for far too long, this could be the time you really put your foot down and speak out and say this is not acceptable. Then again, it could be an emotional issue or something to do with Christmas arrangements, where you may feel that other people are taking your good nature or even your sacrifice or your leadership for granted. So you could find yourself uncharacteristically rather defensive. The sign of Cancer governs the fourth house, and therefore this fourth house energy of the Mars in its retrograde, and the moon, which of course governs the sign of Cancer, having Mars in Cancer in a natal horoscope can make people quite reactive. So I think that there could be something that can be triggered around your emotional situation very strongly over this next couple of weeks. And just be aware, because of the sensitivity of Neptune and Jupiter together, whatever you feel, you're going to feel it big time. Just be aware with Mercury just having nibbled into your 11th house, that's of the collective, where of course you have Pluto in weight. It's going to be joined shortly by Venus and by the Sun from the winter solstice. So as you come to the end of the year and you think about your long-term prospects, I think you're going to do so in a very, very deep and considered way, because Venus is going to be conjunct Pluto as you enter the new year. So whatever associations you've got, they need to be with people who really recognise and appreciate you. And if they celebrate you, you're giving them everything. If they don't celebrate you as much as you want, even if they're not doing anything particularly bad, I think what you're looking is for real depth, a real meaning in all your closest involvements: family, friendships, love life, work colleagues, and that this needs to knit into your longer term future. But at this stage of this year, I think if there is something that's out of balance between work and home, you need to address it over the next 2 weeks. Otherwise, you could find that your feelings really, really get super hot and frustrated. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. I am sorry that this is a little bit late getting out. Simply, there's so much going on at home that we're making some changes. And thank you so much for bearing with me. It's lovely to be with you, as always.